let's move along here to, oh yes, Adrian from Australia/New Zealand. And my God, I think it's like, I don't know if it's 3:30 a.m. over there or 4:30 or 2:30, but hello, Adrian, you're up next.
Yeah, morning, Brad.
Good
It's 4:30 in the
morning.
morning.
What time is it?
It's 4:30 in the morning.
Oh, I know, like I said, we went back and forth via email. I was saying I was doing a special show. I didn't know if you could make it, but are you going to go back to bed after this?
Yes, very
Okay.
much so.
All right. So what is the size of the game that you're playing?
I'm playing 2-5 at Crown Melbourne.
2-5 at Crown Melbourne. Was it a 1,500 buy-in or
It's a 1K cap.
1,000? Let's see. Okay.
And we not the stacks actually matter, but we're 1,200 effective.
1,200 effect. Okay. Adrian goes by Kip on Discord for you CLP subscribers. See a lot of him. All right, so 2-5 Crown, $1,000 cap, 1,200 effective. Okay.
Yeah, I'm in +1, and I've got the black aces.
So hero in +1. We play 9-handed.
Sorry, 8-handed. All Crown games are 8-handed.
Okay, 8-handed. So hero in +1, black aces. Okay.
And I raised to 20.
Okay.
And the cutoff and who will be the main villain and the button call.
So cutoff and button call. So it's three ways.
Yes.
So it's $60. Okay.
Yep. And then the small and big blind fold.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and then we go. Oh, quick note on the cutoff, who's the main villain. Very older guy. I call him a sailor because he's got a lot of old like military type tattoos. But more importantly, he's limped with ace king suited before and only raised on the turn when he flops trips. So he's very, very passive.
Which guy is this? Which position?
The cutoff. He's the main villain.
So maybe passive. Okay. Yep. Passive
sailor. Passive sailor. Yes. Yeah. King of clubs, 9 of spades, 8 of spades.
King of clubs, 9 of spades, 8 of spades is the flop hero with aces, black aces, ace of clubs, ace of spades, king of clubs, 9 of spades, 8 of spades. Okay.
Yes, and I'm first to act, so I size up a little bit here rather than my normal half pot. I go to 40.
So hero bets 40. Anytime I look at these situations now too, we've talked about this. I want to experiment a little bit with it because I can tell you I don't do it all that much. Maybe not necessarily on this board because of the fact that there are some 2-pair available, but get a board like a king 8 deuce or something like that. When you flop thick value and you unblock top pair, you can go for check raises as the pre-flop raiser some of the time. The disaster is when somebody bet folds like a king. I don't know if that's really all that common nowadays. So if it was like king 8 deuce and you have a set of 8s or aces, you can check raise and build some more money up in the pot. It starts to get a little bit treacherous on boards that start to approach this where there's 2-pair possible and multi-way. I'm just kind of throwing it out. I kind of like to play heads up because I think the guys, if you're heads up, a king betting off is going to be forced to defend a lot more than like if it's multi-way. If like say you check and then somebody in the middle here bets, the guy calls behind you, check raise. You might get like king jack to fold in between, which would be a disaster. But yeah, no, I mean, fine. Yeah, size up a little bit. So you go 40, okay.
Yeah, I do like the check raise on this particular board and with a 3-person pot, but both these opponents are quite passive and showing themselves to be passive, so I didn't think either of them would stab. Mm-hmm. Hence one of the reasons why I led the cutoff calls and the button folds.
All right, so this passive guy calls next to act, button folds. Obviously, that should be somewhat stronger because he's not closing the action. The pot's 140. You have the ace of spades, so he can't have the nut flush draw. King 9-8. I mean, obviously he can have a king, right? He can have, Jack 10. He could have spades, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't sound to me like he even might not even have a 9 pre-flop anyways. I don't know if he's calling with a 9 in between here. Maybe 10-9 or something like that.
Yeah. Hold all those thoughts because on the turn comes the queen of spades.
Oh, okay. So king of clubs, 9 of spades, 8 of spades. turn is the queen of spades. So you holding aces with the ace of spades, obviously, like, you're not going anywhere, but if you plug in that range of hands that we talked about here, Jack 10, spades, and then king queen. And the funny thing about this is that, I mean, I know you said passive, but the more the guy VPIPs like up towards like, say, like the 30, mid 30% VPIP level, I actually think the worse card this is for you. And the reason why that is because if a guy VPIPs like at that level, which isn't like insane, but slightly loose, he's probably playing all king queen off. And he might be playing like Jack 10 off. Because there's a huge difference. I mean, if you look at that, right? Jack 10 suited, there's only 4 combos, right? Now, if you start putting Jack 10 off in there, now there's 16 combos of Jack 10. And if he's playing like King Queen off, well, there's 9 combos of King Queen. Against a really tight player that won't have those hands, it's a little bit different. But here, obviously, somebody he could have the King of Spades. But in order for him just to have the naked king of spades, he would either have to have ace king off, which you said he didn't 3-bet before, maybe, but you've got 2 of the aces in your hand, king jack off, right? Otherwise, he's turned to flush, right? With like king jack suited. So I probably do a lot of checking here. Again, what's the gauge on this guy for like does he play a lot of hands pre-flop here?
He does play a lot of hands pre-flop. He, as I said, he's. I don't think I've seen him raise at all. I've been at the table for about 45, 50 minutes, and the very passive pre and on the flop. And as I said previously, he only came active on the turn when he check raised when he had 3 aces, for example.
I mean, there is a case to be made here for betting kind of like 1/3-ish from out of position too, because you have the ace of spades. Like, I don't know. If you sort of quote unquote live node lock, what that means is what is a response? And this is what the work that Nate did like for the Solve for Live Preflop app, where he sort of made some assumptions and adjusted and made like a preflop chart based upon those assumptions. So in this particular case, if you make the assumptions that you're just never going to get raised here ever, then you probably can bet something like 50. And again, I mean, the only thing that's bad about betting is if you start getting raised by like other hands that are better than yours, but like Jack 10, King Queen, right? Small flushes. But I don't know if that's going to happen when you tag a guy as passive, right?
I didn't think he would ever raise with anything less than at least 2 pair the straight or.
I honestly think if you bet 50 here, I don't even know if I don't know. I don't think he's raising. I mean, like I said, that's making an assumption. But for a passive guy, sometimes it's very easy to play against these passive guys. They will not raise with Jack 10 and King Queen. So if you're up against a guy like that who's not going to raise with King Queen or Jack 10, then I think the play is to bet small.
Yes, and that's what I did actually.
Okay.
Well, so I went for 65. I got a bit greedy.
I mean, it's slightly more than I had recommended. But so Hero bets 65. The other interesting thing too about taking small sizing and then let's say like whatever, you bet 50 to 65 and then he calls. It's interesting what comes on the river, like what you want to do. Like you might run out of value. Like you might not get 3 streets from your hand depending on the run out. That's fine. You already got 2 streets. And sometimes you might have value owned yourself on turn, but that's okay too. So Hero bets 65 and he calls again, I assume?
Yes, he does.
All right. So 270, right? To the river?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. King of clubs, 9 of spades, 8 of spades, queen of spades here with aces, with the ace of spades. Has bet flop and bet turn. Okay, what is the river?
The 9 of clubs.
9 of clubs. Okay, that's interesting. That's actually a really good card for you. And the reason why that's a good card is because you beat King Queen now. That was one of the ones that I was the most concerned about him. When you talk about people who like flat call pre, right? King Queen just kind of like, it kind of like, it really, really jumps out at me here because there are guys that will fold king jack offsuit, right? Pre. But a lot of guys like to call with king queen, whether it is offsuit or suited in this particular spot. So that was the thing that kind of bothered me the most here. But now that you can beat king queen, I think you have a value bet here. And again, it's like one of these spots where, okay, if you bet and like he's got jack 10 or he's got like small spades, that's fine. I mean, I still think, remember the river value betting equation is when you're betting for value, when you're called, are you good more than, the dead equation is more than 50% of the time. We tend to target like 60% because it's a kind of a complex thing because of the bet sizing that you use. Like if you're betting larger, the more you lose if you value on yourself. But I would definitely say that you're better here 60% of the time. It's close. It's not like you're good 90% of the time here. So whenever you're in a situation like this and it's close, it still warrants a value bet. You just got to realize that you're probably going to lose 1/3 of the time when you bet for value here. That's fine. Because if you don't make those value bets, you're not winning as much as you could, right? Because you're going to scoop up the value the other 2/3 of the time that you're ahead. So
yes. So in game, I worked out that the nine of clubs was a great card for me because of the fact exactly that I counterfeit king queen, which was a big part of his range. So it came down to the sizing at this point in time, and I went for $140, and I'm interested to know what your thoughts on that is.
I think that that's fine. I mean, the only time that you get to go, I guess you could say the times that you go larger here is that if he is calling with everything that he arrives here with for pot, and I'm not saying that he is, but if he's calling with everything he arrives here with for pot, then the bet is pot because we still think that we're ahead of, I think, like 2/3 of the range that he arrives with. That is if he calls. And it's kind of interesting because you look at this and you're like, well, what if he's got like king jack offsuit here? If he's got king jack offsuit with like the jack of spades or something, or just whatever, king 10 off, does he call for like 250? Because a lot of guys will look at this and they're like, wow, Adrian's still betting here. This is like one of these situations where you can make a case for larger betting because your opponent might actually think, I say this a lot, that you're polarized, even though they don't even know what that means. Because if they flip the situation around and they're playing in your spot, they would never take one pair like this. So they're like, well, this guy either has a boat or he's like bluffing with the ace of spades. So if you got the same calls with like king jack, king 10 for pot, as you're going to get called by king queen, then the play is pot. I'm not saying that that's the case. I'm just working that through. I might bet like 200. You went 140. Okay.
Yeah, and he calls pretty quickly, like maybe 3 to 4 seconds. Sort of looks at the bet, looks at it, and then and puts the money in.
Did you get a feel? Did you get like a oh shit feeling with the pace of his call?
A little bit, yeah. It was a wee bit too quick. That's why I was asking you about the sizing. Was because so I just roll my hand, and he looks at my hand, looks at the board, and then the dealer actually has to explain to him twice that I have 2 pair, and then he mucks.
Sounds to me like he had king queen.
Sounds to me like he had king queen as well.
Yeah.
I obviously don't get a reveal, but definitely got the feeling that he had a 2 pair as well. So it was either queen 8 or, which is unlikely, but yeah, king queen.
So
was my feeling.
Yeah, I mean that definitely sounds like king queen. Spam stuff says and that's another thing too. I mean, you can work through all the combinations. Again, it's kind of hard to necessarily tag down a guy's range, but if he's always calling pre with king queen and he's not calling like king jack and king 10 off pre, and he also sometimes has ace king off too, even though you have 2 aces, then you could very, very easily make the case that the sizing should be large because he's going to definitely be calling pot with those hands. Now, spam stuff says king queen is probably the only hand which hero beats, which is calling more than 100. I disagree with that guy. I already went why I said I disagree with him. Maybe not always, but there's a lot of players that if they arrive here, like with King Jack, they're going to call 225 because they have top pair. I mean, you show me the player that just goes call, fold with top pair at the end at this level. They're few and far between. Usually there have to be for-profit players that are capable of doing that, not like super passive guys. But that is interesting to note, though, that if he just doesn't have King Jack and King 10 here, just because of pre-flop, then you could easily make the case that you're kind of targeting like 9 combos of King Queen. But then you have to also factor in like, well, does that mean he's got Jack 10 off? That's 16 combos, smaller flushes, things like that. Anyways, Adrian, thanks for getting up for us and thanks for the call.